He offered $100 million as a joke. He didn't laugh when the Black Maid's daughter actually earned it. It started on a Tuesday morning in downtown Seattle, right at the top of Vailtech Industries' glass skyscraper, 42 floors up, where the air always smelled like polished marble and expensive coffee. The tension inside the boardroom could almost be felt through the walls. A team of engineers sat around a long table, laptops open, fingers frozen over keyboards. At the head of the table stood Kenneth Vail, the CEO. 48 years old, tall, well-groomed, and always dressed like he was about to step into a magazine shoot. His voice carried the kind of sharpness that could slice through conversation without warning. 3 weeks, he said, his tone heavy with irritation. 3 weeks, and not one of you geniuses has figured out why the system keeps crashing. Nobody dared to look him in the eye. Only the sound of the air conditioning filled the silence. Kenneth turned toward the big digital screen on the wall. Lines of code scrolling so fast they looked like green rain. The company's flagship software, Vantage OS, was supposed to launch next week. It was the product that would make or break a billion-dollar merger with a major tech firm in San Jose. But the program had one fatal glitch. It kept shutting down right before completing its encryption sequence. The boardroom had seen desperation before, but not like this. A senior engineer named Darius Lynn finally spoke up. "Sir, we've been over every possible cause. Memory leaks, buffer overflow, bad patches. None of it explains why the system..." Kenneth slammed his hand on the table, making Darius jump. "Don't give me excuses, Darius. I don't pay for excuses. I pay for results." Someone in the back shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke again. Kenneth took a slow breath, pacing the room. "You know what the press will do to us if this deal collapses? You know what happens to me if this company falls apart?" His eyes darted from one engineer to the next. "I built Vailtech from the ground up. I refuse to let a bunch of code monkeys ruin it." His assistant, Marilyn, stood near the door, quietly holding a tablet. Even she couldn't meet his gaze. She had seen this side of him before, and the part that lashed out when things slipped beyond his control. Finally, Kenneth leaned over the table and said, almost in disbelief, "I swear, I could hand this laptop to the janitor and probably get better results." The room stayed silent, but the sting of that line hung in the air. To him, it was just another insult, something thrown out in frustration. But that sentence, that one careless statement would soon change everything. Kenneth straightened his tie and gestured toward the door. "I'm done wasting time. Figure it out or start cleaning out your desks." He walked out, leaving the engineers staring at one another, tired, defeated, and humiliated. Outside the boardroom, the hum of conversation from lower floors didn't reach him. His footsteps echoed through the marble corridor as he headed for his private elevator. The walls were lined with framed photos, product launches, handshakes with investors, magazine covers featuring his face. They all screamed success. But right now, Kenneth felt cornered. He pressed the elevator button and muttered under his breath, $100 million on the line, and not one damn person can fix it. Then, almost mockingly, he laughed. "Whoever does, I'll give them $100 million myself." The elevator doors slid open, and Kenneth stepped inside, shaking his head. To him, that promise was a joke, a way to vent. But words have a way of traveling, especially when spoken in anger. Down on the 10th floor, Renee Coleman pushed her cleaning cart out of the break room, unaware that the same words that had just left Kenneth's mouth would soon reach her ears and change her daughter's life forever. But what happens when someone who's never even been noticed inside that building suddenly becomes the center of everyone's attention? The next morning, the mood inside Vailtech felt different, heavier, almost suffocating. The engineers looked like they hadn't slept. Coffee cups were stacked like trophies of defeat. A pale light filtered through the tall glass windows, bouncing off the whiteboard filled with equations and desperate scribbles. Kenneth Vail walked in right on time, as always. His navy suit was spotless, his shoes gleaming. But beneath that perfect exterior, frustration was boiling. "All right," he said, clapping his hands once. "Let's hear some good news for a change." No one spoke. The only response came from the whir of computers and the faint tapping of keys. Finally, Darius Lynn, the lead software architect, cleared his throat. Sir, we tried running the encryption under a new framework, but the code keeps breaking during compilation. It's like something is looping endlessly. Kenneth crossed his arms. So fix the loop. We've tried, Darius said softly. Every time we patch one section, another fails. It's like the system's fighting us. Kenneth's jaw tightened. Fighting you? Darius, it's a machine, not a ghost. A quiet laugh escaped someone at the back, but Kenneth's glare killed it instantly. He looked around the room. We are days, not weeks, away from losing this merger. Do you all understand that? I've got investors breathing down my neck, analysts predicting bankruptcy, and now I have a team of people telling me they can't fix their own creation. One of the younger programmers, Jay Patel, spoke hesitantly. Maybe if we took it offline for a few days. Kenneth cut him off. Offline? We'd lose everything. Our backups, our testing data. The media would eat us alive. Number, I don't want suggestions. I want a solution. He turned toward Marilyn. Get the press office ready. If this doesn't work by tomorrow, I'll have to lie through my teeth to the board. Marilyn nodded quietly. She knew better than to argue. Kenneth walked over to the window, looking down at the city below. Tiny cars moving through the morning haze, people living their lives without knowing the pressure he was under. His reflection stared back at him, confident, proud, untouchable. But inside he was panicking. He turned back to the room. I'll tell you something. The person who fixes this, I don't care who it is, will get $100 million. He smirked. Heck, even the janitor if they can do it. That line drew a few uncomfortable smiles, but most of the team looked down. Everyone had heard him say it before, but today it felt sharper, like a dare. Marilyn frowned slightly. Kenneth, maybe you shouldn't... But he waved her off. Relax, Marilyn. No one here's taking that seriously. It's called motivation. Still, his voice carried through the hallway as the meeting broke apart. A few staffers outside whispered, passing the story along, as gossip tends to do. By the time Renee Coleman rolled her cleaning cart past the executive floor later that afternoon, she'd already overheard fragments of the joke. Whoever fixes it gets $100 million fish or so, one intern laughed in the hallway. Guess I should start learning how to code. Renee smiled faintly as she pushed her mop bucket forward. $100 million? She said under her breath. Lord, that's more than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. She didn't think much of it then. She just kept cleaning the hall, humming softly, trying to finish before her daughter arrived from school. Renee had been with Vailtech for 7 years. She'd cleaned up spilled coffee, broken glass, and even the occasional argument no one else wanted to acknowledge. But what she didn't know, not yet, was that her daughter, waiting downstairs in the lobby with a cracked laptop and a curious mind, was about to do what Kenneth Vale's entire army of engineers could not. But first, Renee had to tell her about that careless promise, the joke that wasn't meant to matter. Renee Coleman's day started before the sun came up. By 6:30, she was already on the bus, heading toward downtown Seattle, her uniform neatly pressed, her hair tied back under a black scarf. Her hands still ached from scrubbing floors the day before, but she didn't complain. She had a rhythm: work hard, stay humble, and never let anyone see how tired she really was. By 4 o'clock, she'd usually be finishing her shift just in time for her daughter, Imani, to show up from school. That day, when Imani walked into the lobby, she had her old backpack slung over one shoulder and her worn-out laptop tucked under her arm. She was 16, tall for her age, with a head full of soft curls and eyes that seemed to always be thinking about something. "Hey, Mama," Imani said, dropping her bag on a bench near the window. Renee smiled, wiping her hands with a towel. "Hey, baby. You get your homework done?" "Most of it," Imani said. "Wi-Fi was slow again at school. I figured I'd just finish it here while you finish up." Renee nodded. "All right, stay out the way of those folks upstairs, you hear me? They get nervous when they see people they don't recognize." "I know, Mama." Imani opened her laptop, the screen flickering a little. She'd built it herself from spare parts she'd found at a thrift shop. The thing looked rough, but it worked, and it was her pride and joy. Renee smiled, shaking her head. "You and that computer, you'd think you were building a spaceship." Imani laughed. "Maybe one day I will." A few minutes passed before Renee spoke again. "You know, I heard something funny today." "What's that?" Renee leaned against her mop handle. "That big boss man upstairs, Mr. Vale, He said he'd give $100 million to whoever fixes his computer problem. Even said the janitor could get it. Amani looked up, eyebrows raised. Wait, for real? Mm-hmm, Renee said, chuckling. You know how rich folks talk when they're mad? He was probably just joking, but Amani's eyes narrowed with curiosity. What kind of problem? I don't know, baby. Something with their software or whatever they build up there. All I know is the whole company's running around trying to fix it. Amani bit her lip, thinking, can I see it? Renee blinked. See what? Their system. Maybe I can figure it out. Her mother laughed. Girl, don't go getting yourself fired before you even get hired. That's grown folks' business, but Amani wasn't joking. Mama, you said they can't fix it, right? Maybe it's something simple. Maybe they missed it. Renee sighed. Even if you could fix it, what makes you think they'd listen to you? You're not one of them. Amani smiled. Maybe I don't need to be. Renee shook her head, but she knew her daughter's tone. That calm determination that always meant she was serious. Ever since Amani was little, she'd been curious about how things worked. At 9, she'd repaired an old fan using tape and a paperclip. At 12, she rebuilt their neighbor's dead computer using parts from a broken printer. The girl was gifted, no doubt about it. As the minutes passed, Renee finished cleaning the executive floor, her thoughts drifting back to that careless offer. She could still hear Kenneth Vale's voice echoing in the hall, full of arrogance. $100 million. Even the janitor, if they can do it. She looked down at her cleaning cart and smiled softly. If only, she whispered. When she came back downstairs, Amani was typing furiously, eyes glued to the screen. You okay, baby? Amani nodded. Yeah, I was just reading up on Vailtech's software. They use a hybrid encryption model, same one we studied last semester in Computer Science Club. Their error logs are public for beta users, so I pulled a few samples. Renee blinked. You did what now? Amani smiled. Don't worry, Mama. It's all public. I didn't hack anything. Renee just stared, unsure whether to be proud or worried. The building lights dimmed as the evening crew started to pack up. Upstairs, the engineers were still at it, typing, testing, failing again and again. And downstairs, a teenage girl with an old laptop was unknowingly walking straight toward the biggest moment of her life. But the problem was, even if she solved it, who would believe her? By Thursday morning, Kenneth Vale looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. His once perfect tie was loose, his eyes red from staring at screens too long. The conference room had turned into a war zone of empty coffee cups, tangled cords, and exhausted faces. He leaned over the table and barked, Tell me someone has something. Anything. No one answered. Darius Lynn rubbed his temples and muttered, We're out of options, sir. Every test hits the same wall, Kenneth scoffed. Then build a new door. A nervous laugh from someone in the corner quickly died down. Sir, Darius said carefully, if we rewrite the system, it'll take at least 6 weeks. The merger's next Tuesday. Kenneth slammed a folder on the table. Then maybe you should have worked faster 6 weeks ago. The tension in the room was unbearable. One engineer muttered something under his breath, but Kenneth's glare froze him mid-sentence. Look, Kenneth said, pacing in front of the projector, this company was built on innovation, on grit, and right now, all I see are excuses. He turned to Marilyn. Call the investors. Tell them we're optimizing security parameters. That'll buy us another 48 hours. Marilyn hesitated. Kenneth, that's not true. I didn't ask if it was true, he snapped. Just do it. Marilyn opened her mouth, but then closed it. There was no winning this argument. She turned and walked out quietly, the door clicking behind her. Kenneth rubbed his temples, looking around the room again. You know what? I'll make this simple. Whoever fixes this, anyone, gets $100 million. You hear me? His voice echoed through the glass walls. I don't care if it's a janitor, a barista, or some random kid off the street. You fix it, you're rich. The words hung in the air. He meant it as sarcasm, pure frustration. But the thing about arrogance is that it echoes farther than you expect. Outside the boardroom, 2 employees who had just walked past the open door exchanged glances. One of them chuckled. Did you hear that? $100 million. Imagine that. By the time they reached the elevator, the joke had already spread through 3 departments. Within an hour, it was being whispered across the building, from the cafeteria to the mailroom. And by the time it reached the 10th floor janitorial closet, Renee Coleman was emptying trash bins and heard one of the security guards laughing about it. "Man, if I knew how to code, I'd be rich right now," he said. "What's that about?" Renee asked, tightening the trash bag. The guard grinned. The boss lost his mind again. Said he'd give anyone $100 million if they fix his computer mess. Joked that even the janitor could try. Renee froze for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Even the janitor, huh?" "Yeah," the guard said, chuckling as he walked away. "Crazy world." When Renee got back to the lobby that evening, Imani was sitting cross-legged on the bench, her laptop open and fingers flying. "Hey, baby," Renee said. "You still working on your project?" Imani didn't look up. "Sort of." "Mama, you said they're using a hybrid encryption system, right?" "Yeah, that's what I heard. I've been looking at some of their public code from last year's product launch," Imani said. "They reused part of their old algorithm for this one. Same structure, but the new version doesn't handle input overflow correctly. That's probably why it keeps crashing." Renee blinked. "Say that again, slower." Imani smiled. "Their system's too rigid. It can't process certain variables. If you patch the redundancy layer instead of rewriting it, the program should stabilize." Renee laughed. "Girl, you sound like you're speaking another language." "Sorry," Imani said, grinning. "Basically, I think I know how to fix it." Renee shook her head. "Imani, that's a billion-dollar company. You think you can just walk in there and fix what all those men in suits couldn't?" Imani looked up, eyes steady. "Why not?" Renee didn't answer. She just stared at her daughter, realizing she wasn't joking. Imani closed her laptop, tucked it under her arm, and said, "Mama, you said he offered $100 million, right?" Renee chuckled nervously. "Baby, that man was being sarcastic." "Still," Imani said, "if he's offering, I want to try." Renee sighed, glancing toward the elevators that led up to the executive floors. "You'll get me fired if you start messing with those people." "I won't," Imani said softly. "I just want to help." The way she said it made Renee pause. There was something calm, certain, and oddly grown up in her tone. "Fine," Renee said finally. "You can come upstairs with me tomorrow, but you stay quiet, you hear? Don't talk to anyone unless I tell you to." Imani nodded. "Yes, ma'am?" That night, as Renee washed her hands in the break room sink, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The same reflection she saw every day. Tired eyes, worn palms, and quiet acceptance. But tonight, there was something else. A small flicker of curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, her daughter could do the impossible. But if she was right, how would Kenneth Vale react to being shown up by a 16-year-old girl with a second-hand laptop? The next morning, the city was covered in a soft drizzle. Renee held her umbrella over Imani as they walked into Vailtech's towering lobby. The marble floor gleamed beneath their shoes, reflecting the morning light. People in expensive suits rushed past them, badges flashing, coffee in hand. Imani's eyes darted everywhere. The giant digital wall displaying Vailtech's slogan, "Innovation through precision." She whispered to her mother, "They really like showing off, huh?" Renee smiled nervously. "Shh, don't say that too loud." They took the elevator to the 10th floor, where Renee usually started her shift. But today, she wasn't thinking about the mop bucket. She was thinking about how on earth she was going to let her daughter peek at a system worth billions without losing her job. When they reached the hallway, Marilyn, Kenneth's assistant, stepped out of an office carrying a tablet. She looked surprised to see Renee. "Morning, Renee," she said kindly. "Who's this?" "My daughter, Imani," Renee replied. "She's just waiting for me while I finish up." Marilyn smiled. "Hi, Imani. You can wait in the lounge if you like. We've got Wi-Fi and snacks." Imani hesitated. "Actually, ma'am, could I maybe sit near my mom? I like watching her work." Marilyn laughed softly. "That's sweet." "Sure." She walked off, tapping on her tablet. As soon as Marilyn disappeared, Imani whispered, "Mama, can I just look at the code on that open console in the corner? It's running their system logs." Renee frowned. "Imani, no. That's not yours to touch. I won't change anything," Imani said quickly. "I just want to see if I'm right." Before Renee could respond, Imani had already moved closer. She didn't touch the keyboard at first. She just studied the screen. Lines of green text rolled past, error reports flashing red. Her eyes scanned the data, and within seconds, her expression changed. "There it is," she whispered. "I knew it." "What is it?" Renee asked, glancing nervously toward the hallway. "They're looping their encryption verification twice. It's redundant, like checking your password 2 times in a row without clearing the cache. The system's tripping over itself," Renee blinked. "So, can you fix it?" Amani nodded slowly. "If they let me—" Just then, Kenneth Vale stormed out of his office, voice sharp. "Marilyn, get Darius and the rest in here right now. We're rerunning the full diagnostic before the investors call in." Renee quickly stepped aside, lowering her eyes, but Kenneth stopped mid-step when he noticed Amani standing beside her. "Who's this?" he demanded. "My daughter, sir," Renee said carefully. "She's just waiting for me." Kenneth raised an eyebrow. "This is a secure floor. You know that, right?" "Yes, sir," Renee said quickly. "She's not touching anything." Amani, calm but curious, spoke up. "Mr. Vale, is your system the one with the double verification bug?" Kenneth blinked. "Excuse me?" "Your software," Amani said, her voice steady. "The encryption keeps crashing because it's verifying the data twice. You need to isolate the redundancy loop." The engineers who had just entered froze in place. Darius turned to her, eyes wide. "How do you know that?" "I looked at your error logs," Amani said simply. "It's in your public beta data." Kenneth frowned, half annoyed, half intrigued. "That's impossible. We've been testing that for weeks." "Maybe," Amani replied, "but you've been patching the wrong segment. The bug isn't in the encryption module. It's in the validation layer that runs before it." Darius stepped forward, glancing at Kenneth. "Sir, if she's right." Kenneth waved a hand. "No, we're not taking advice from—" He stopped himself before finishing the sentence, but the tone said enough. Amani met his eyes calmly. "You said anyone who could fix it gets $100 million. I just want to show you where the problem is." The room went quiet. Even Marilyn, standing by the doorway, looked stunned. Kenneth sighed. "Fine, humor me," he gestured toward the console. "Show us." Renee's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "Baby, be careful," she whispered. Amani nodded and walked up to the keyboard. Her fingers moved quickly, steady but confident. The engineers gathered around, whispering to each other as she scrolled through lines of code. "See this part?" she said, pointing. "You're running this check twice. It keeps duplicating the encryption key, which corrupts the output." Darius leaned closer, then looked up slowly. "She's right." Kenneth frowned. "Run it." Darius typed a few commands and hit enter. The room went silent. The screen flashed once, twice, and then the error disappeared. The program compiled successfully for the first time in weeks. It worked. Kenneth just stood there stunned. Marilyn covered her mouth. One of the engineers whispered, "No way." Amani stepped back from the console, her hands folded. "You just needed to clear the redundancy before compiling. Simple fix." Kenneth stared at her, speechless. He looked from the screen to her face, then to Renee. What just happened?" Renee smiled proudly. "My daughter happened, sir." Kenneth's expression shifted between disbelief and irritation. "You mean to tell me a 16-year-old just did what my entire engineering team couldn't?" Darius spoke quietly. "Yes, sir." That's exactly what happened. For a moment, no one moved. Then Kenneth exhaled sharply and muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." Amani turned toward her mother. "Can we go home now?" Renee nodded, still shaking her head in disbelief. "Yeah, baby. Let's go." As they walked toward the elevator, every pair of eyes followed them. No one said a word. But upstairs, Kenneth Vale was already thinking about how to spin the story. Because deep down, he knew this moment would not stay quiet for long. By the next morning, Vale Tech was on fire, not literally, but in every other way that mattered. The news had spread like lightning across every department. Someone had recorded the incident on their phone, and within hours, clips of Amani fixing the code had leaked across social media. #ValeTech. Miracle was trending before lunch. Kenneth Vale sat in his glass office, staring at the video looping on his monitor. The moment Amani pointed at the screen, calmly explaining what went wrong while his entire engineering team stood frozen behind her. He rubbed his forehead. "Unbelievable," he muttered. Marilyn stepped in quietly with a tablet in her hand. "They want a statement." Kenneth looked up. Who? Everyone, she said. Investors, media, even the employees. They all want to know who she is, and if you're actually giving her the money you promised. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. It was a joke, Marilyn. A joke. You really think I'm about to hand over $100 million to a janitor's kid? Marilyn hesitated. Sir, with all due respect, you said it in front of 50 people, and now the whole world's seen it. The system's stable, the merger's back on track, and the public's obsessed with her. You can't ignore this. Kenneth stood and walked toward the window, looking down at the city. I built this company. I won't let a teenage girl make me look like a fool. Maybe she didn't make you look like one, Marilyn said quietly. Maybe you did that yourself. Kenneth turned, glare sharp. Careful. Marilyn didn't flinch. You could turn this into a win. Publicly thank her, offer her something reasonable, a scholarship, a mentorship, anything. But if you try to bury this, you'll look worse. Kenneth didn't answer. He just stared at the reflection in the window again. His reflection. For the first time, he didn't like what he saw. Downstairs, in the break room, Renee and Imani were sitting at a small table surrounded by cleaning supplies. Imani was scrolling through her cracked phone screen wide-eyed. Mama, look. She turned the phone toward her. There she was, in the middle of the trending video. Millions of views, thousands of comments, people calling her the genius girl, the real deal, the prodigy who humbled a CEO. Renee blinked. Lord have mercy. A knock came at the door. It was Marilyn. She smiled warmly. Renee, Mr. Vale would like to see you and your daughter upstairs. Renee frowned. Now? Yes. Right now, Renee stood up, her hands trembling slightly. Baby, stay calm, all right? Don't say nothing rude. Let me do the talking. Imani smiled faintly. I'll try. When they walked into Kenneth's office, he was sitting behind his desk, suit immaculate again, trying to reclaim control. Mrs. Coleman, he said, standing. And Imani, please, have a seat. They sat across from him. The silence stretched a little too long. Finally, Kenneth cleared his throat. First, let me start by saying congratulations. You saved us from a very costly mistake. Thank you, sir, Imani said quietly. He forced a smile. Now, about that $100 million remark, obviously that was just an expression, a figure of speech. Renee frowned. So you're saying you're not honoring it? Kenneth sighed. Look, let's be realistic. You can't expect... Imani cut him off, her tone polite but firm. I don't expect $100 million, sir, but I do expect honesty. Kenneth blinked. Excuse me? You said anyone who could fix it would be rewarded. I fixed it. I'm not asking for money you don't want to give. I just think people deserve to know the truth. That it wasn't luck, it was skill. Kenneth stared at her, caught off guard by her composure. Renee glanced between them. My daughter's not greedy, Mr. Vale. She's smart, smarter than most adults I know. She just wants credit where it's due. For a moment, Kenneth didn't say a word. The weight of the moment sat heavy in the room. Finally, Marilyn spoke from the doorway. Sir, the media is waiting for a statement. They want to meet her. Kenneth took a deep breath and nodded slowly. Fine. We'll do this my way. He stood and walked around the desk, stopping in front of Imani. You have talent, he said. Real talent. Valetech can help nurture that. How about a scholarship? Full ride to any university you want, all expenses paid, and a $50,000 stipend for your mother as a thank you. Renee's eyes widened. 50,000? Kenneth smiled. That's fair, isn't it? Imani looked up at him. It's kind, sir. But if you're doing this to make yourself look good, don't. Do it because it's right. That one sentence hit him harder than he expected. Kenneth didn't respond. He just nodded, jaw tight. Understood. By that evening, Valetech released an official statement. We're proud to recognize the extraordinary talent of Imani Coleman, whose insight helped restore one of our critical systems. She represents the future of innovation and intelligence we strive to support. The story made national headlines. Talk shows invited Imani for interviews. Tech forums called her a prodigy. Even universities reached out. But none of that mattered to Renee as much as seeing her daughter's face light up with pride. At home, while Amani answered messages from reporters, Renee sat quietly on the couch, whispering a prayer of thanks. But upstairs in his penthouse, Kenneth Vale couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, he felt small, humbled in a way money couldn't fix. And deep down, he knew that this wasn't just about a broken system. It was about a broken mindset, one that Amani had forced him to confront. The morning after the story hit national news, Seattle felt brighter, at least to Renee and Amani. The rain had finally stopped, sunlight spilling across the sidewalks as they walked together to the cafe down the street. People recognized them now. A man in a delivery van waved as he passed. Two baristas whispered, smiling as they handed over their drinks. "You're the girl from the video, right?" one of them said, shyly. "The one who fixed that company's software?" Amani smiled politely. "Yeah, that was me." Renee laughed softly as they sat down by the window. "You're famous, baby." "I can't even buy coffee without somebody stopping you." Amani rolled her eyes playfully. "It's weird. I didn't do it for attention." "I know," Renee said, "but you showed a lot of people that talent doesn't come with a title. It comes from what's in here." She tapped her chest gently. Amani smiled. "You always say that." "Because it's true," Renee replied. Across town, Kenneth Vale was sitting in his office, a rare silence filling the space. The merger had gone through, smoother than anyone expected, and the company's reputation had rebounded thanks to the viral story. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside him. He stared at a photo on his desk, the one taken at the press event the day before. He was standing beside Amani and Renee, smiling for the cameras. But his eyes in that photo told a different story. The look of a man worth to confront his pride. Marilyn knocked gently and stepped in. "You've got a request, sir. Imani's school wants you to speak at their STEM assembly next week." Kenneth looked up, surprised. "Me?" "They said it might mean something for the students to hear from the man who underestimated her," Marilyn said carefully. Kenneth gave a tired laugh. "Well, they're not wrong." He leaned back in his chair, silent for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll do it." A week later, the high school gym buzzed with excitement. Students sat on bleachers, phones ready to record, teachers whispering in the background. Renee sat near the front, watching proudly as Amani walked across the stage in her modest blue dress. Kenneth followed behind her, wearing his usual tailored suit, but for once, there was no arrogance in his step. The principal handed him the microphone. "Mr. Vale, thank you for joining us." Kenneth nodded, glancing toward Amani before turning to the crowd. "I'll be honest," he began, "I didn't come here to talk about success. I came to talk about mistakes." "My mistake." The students quieted. When Amani fixed that code, my first reaction wasn't pride. It was disbelief. I didn't think someone her age, someone without a title, could be right when all my experts were wrong. But she was. And that says a lot more about me than it does about her. He paused, letting the words settle. "The truth is, I built my company thinking the smartest people in the room always looked and spoke a certain way. I was wrong. Brilliance doesn't care what you wear, where you come from, or what your badge says. It just speaks. And if you're smart enough to listen, it'll change everything." He turned toward Amani. "I owe this young lady more than a scholarship. I owe her respect. And from this day forward, Vailtech will be launching a program in her name, the Amani Initiative, a mentorship program for underrepresented youth in tech." The gym erupted in applause. Students cheered, teachers clapped, and Renee wiped tears from her eyes. Amani stepped forward, her voice calm but warm. "Thank you, Mr. Vale. But I just want people to remember one thing. Sometimes, the person you overlook is the one holding the answer you've been searching for." The applause grew louder. Kenneth smiled genuinely this time. Not for the cameras, not for the investors, but for himself. He finally understood. After the event, as the crowd filtered out, Renee hugged her daughter tightly. "I'm so proud of you, baby. You didn't just fix a computer. You fixed something in that man's heart." Amani laughed softly. "I didn't mean to." "Sometimes," Renee said, "that's how change starts. By accident." That evening, as the sun dipped over the Seattle skyline, Kenneth stood in his office again, looking out over the city. His reflection in the glass wasn't the same as before. The arrogance was gone. He whispered to himself, maybe the real fix wasn't in the code after all. Because in the end, this story wasn't about a system crash. It was about what happens when pride blinds you to potential, and how a little humility can rewrite everything. So, the next time someone underestimates you, remember Amani Coleman. Remember that your worth isn't defined by where you work or what they call you. It's defined by what you can do, even when no one's watching. And if you ever find yourself in a room full of people who don't believe in you, do what Amani did. Let your work speak louder than their doubt. If this story moved you, share it. Because somewhere out there, another Imani is waiting for her chance to prove what she's capable of. She just needs someone to believe she can.